So, greetings. Thanks to everyone for coming out to our group author reading. This reading is brought to you by Strong Women, Strange Worlds, which is a group of authors supporting authors. Our mission is to elevate the voices of women and other underrepresented gender identity authors of science fiction, fantasy, and horror through events like our bi-monthly virtual quick read sessions. You can find out more about Strong Women Strange Worlds in the handout we've provided in the chat and by visiting our website, a link to which will be added to the chat real soon now. I am your host today, Sarah Smith, and you can find more about me and the other sponsors and volunteers of Strong Women Strange Worlds in the provided handout. Please note that that recording of this session by the audience is not allowed, and recording of electronic communications, including Zoom meetings and webinars without permission, is illegal. So today we'll be featuring 6 authors: Alicia Hilton, Vanessa MacLaren-Wray, Gabby Gilliam, Leah R. Schuyler, and Marlena Frank. Each author will have 8 minutes to read. Our first reader is Alicia Hilton. Alicia Hilton is an author, editor, arbitrator, professor, actor, and former FBI special agent. Her work has appeared or is forthcoming in Back to Omnipark, Gamut, Strange Horizons, Vastarian, Year's Best Hardcore Horror Volumes 4, 5, and 6, and elsewhere. Alicia, take it away.
Thanks. Hi, I'm going to be reading from Back to Omnipark, and it's an anthology I edited. I also contributed the foreword, which I wrote, and a story, and I'll be reading the foreword and part of my story. Foreword. Truth is a matter of perspective. When my great-uncle Elsner told me about Omnipark, I thought he was joking. A liminal space that was a portal to other worlds? How could that be possible? Parallel planes, interstellar travel, and time travel weren't real. Monsters and extraterrestrials only existed in horror stories and science fiction. Sometimes you can't believe that the impossible is possible until you venture down a tunnel, smell a strange, musky scent, hear tentacles thrashing, feel an invisible talon grazing your cheek. Evil is a matter of perspective. Are the most horrid monsters on Earth or in other dimensions? As a child, I used to fantasize about rescuing people from monsters, serial killers. I was a realist and believed that the most dangerous apex predators were diabolical humans. I thought that cryptids, kaiju, extraterrestrials, and spirits didn't exist until I met a ghost. I finally realized that Uncle Elsner's stories were real. When you open up your mind to the supernatural, you enter a new world. Welcome to Omnipark. Surviving a ghostly encounter was a traumatic experience that was forever etched in my brain. It changed me. I felt compelled to seek out others who the impossible and lived. I heard about Ben Thomas and his quest for stories about Omnipark. My story, Stellar Nucleosynthesis and the Infinite Power of Love, was published in Tales from Omnipark, the first Omnipark anthology. When Ben sought a co-editor for Back to Omnipark, I jumped on board. I was ready to delve into Omnipark's darker mystery, finally unburden my soul, and recruit who would reveal their own horrible secrets. Together, the authors returned to Omnipark's ruins, traveled back in time to the park's early days, and opened the portals. We faced our monsters. Now I'll read from part of my story, Chimera, and incidentally, all of the stories in Back to Omnipark are illustrated, and there is other art throughout the book. Chimera, July 7th, 1973. 9 coyotes tipped up their heads and howled at a disk that silently hovered over the arid plains on the outskirts of Midland, Texas. The disc began to hum. A hatch on the underside slid open. The alpha male's howl turned to a bark, warning the pack of danger. The coyotes bolted for their burrow, a tunnel they'd taken from a badger. The smallest pup was the first to fall. 3 seconds later, all their bodies were twitching in spasms. Dust, but not dust. The powdery substance sprayed from the hatch was nearly invisible. May 18th, 1977. Gwen carried a balisong butterfly knife. Denise had become an expert at hurling shuriken, the ninja stars she'd inherited from her granddad. Up until their senior year of high school, they'd followed all the rules that they learned from horror movies. Always go armed, avoid cabins in the woods, don't have sex, and you'll survive. And teens who had sex got whacked with axes, stabbed with knives, carved up with chainsaws, shot, hung, strangled, or burned alive. All damned good reasons to keep your... The abstinence rule wasn't easy. Gwen yanked down past her hips and tossed her jeans on the floor next to the calculus textbook. Hurry up, Denise said. She was already in Gwen's bed. Gwen stripped off the rest of her clothes and climbed on the bed. It was twin size, so there wasn't much room to maneuver. She lay on her side and caressed Denise's shoulder. Her skin was hot. You want me to open the window? Someone might hear us, Denise giggled. They kissed, first tentatively, then with passion. Gwen stroked Denise's breast, knocked on the bedroom door. Just a sec. She slid off the bed and grabbed her underwear. The door swung open. Into the room. He kept walking until he was close enough to touch Gwen if he'd reached out his hand. The smug grin on his face conveyed that he was enjoying their embarrassment. Denise screamed and pulled up the sheet, covering herself. Gwen said. She curled her hands into fists. She wanted to smack Dad, but lacked the courage. Instead of leaving, he laughed before he turned away. Denise, would you like to stay for dinner? No, thanks, Mr. Sloka. Denise blinked rapidly, like she was trying not to cry. I'll drive you home, Dad said. Gwen picked up Denise's shirt and handed it to her. Hurry, she whispered. Walked into the hallway, leaving the bedroom door open. I'll stop reading now since I'm out of time, but Back to Omnipark is available in paperback, hardcover, and ebook. And tonight I'm going to be giving away 3 copies of the ebook.
Good. Thank you, Alicia. Our second reader is Vanessa MacLaren-Wray. Vanessa MacLaren-Wray writes speculative fiction. And my video is now. Okay. Our second reader is Vanessa MacLaren-Wray. Vanessa MacLaren-Wray writes speculative fiction about humans and other people, making connections in a complex universe. She writes the Patchwork Universe series, including That Was Asked, Shadows of Insurrection, and Flames of Attrition. She often guest hosts for the podcast SMED Publishing in a Big Universe. Vanessa, over to you.
Hello, everyone. I'm just so excited to be here to read from Flames of Attrition. Although it's set in another world with swordsmen and shamans and so on, it's very much an homage to all the veterans in my family who never felt comfortable telling their own war stories. So I kind of made up one for them. So, okay, here's the setup. Corin has just been appointed king, which here translates to commander-in-chief. His small country is on the verge of war, and the enemy has been sending in assassins to take him out. It's the middle of the night, and his bodyguards have just woken him with the news they've captured, instead of killing, the latest assassin. The guys had commandeered a small room near the kitchen with one door and no windows, they said. I took the guys a few paces down the corridor for a pre-interview conference. Listen, I ordered. No sirs, no titles. I'm one of you guys coming to relieve Durst. Got it? Sir, you're not saying to leave you alone. I want information, and she won't know what I look like. And who's in charge here? Me or you? You guys will be right outside. If I need help, I'll shout out. Before they could assemble any more arguments, I pulled that door open and marched in. I gave Durst the sign we'd used back in Underguards for when we were going to play certain stunts on our captain. It worked. Instead of shouting out, "Sir," or worse, he yawned. I yawned back. My turn, buddy. He edged out, eyes full of questions. I took his place in the lone chair. Our prisoner owned a patch of floor in one corner. She didn't have the Army of Light uniform. That would have made her conspicuous and Giscarian, but she had the attitude. Her eyes blazed at me. I rocked in the chair and shifted my gaze from her glare to the door and back again. Give it a minute, I said, as if answering a question from her. She couldn't have been older than my son Calestini's. She didn't have her hair braided up, lakeside style, but you could tell it had been that way recently from the curly waves in it. After my minute was up, I went to the door and eased it open a little. Durst stood guard to the right. Another guard had posted himself to the left. Neither could be seen by our prisoner. I left the door open a crack. Good, I announced. They've gone off to bow and scrape over his royal high and mightiness. Instead of resuming the chair, I slid down next to her and drew my long knife. That got her attention. My cue to begin. Who do I blame for this cock-up? I growled, keeping my voice low and secretive. You're supposed to be here tomorrow night. It's my off night today. I'm here now because they're a man down, thanks to you. She made a confused noise. Might have been words, but that didn't matter. You didn't think they'd send you without an inside help, did you? The man's guarded like he's some kind of valuable merchandise. But never mind. We need to get you safely out so you can report back. They need to send someone else, though. You're a known face now. If I come back a failure, they'll think I'm a spy. I looked her in the eyes. That always makes people think you're being truthful. It's not your fault you got bad orders. She had wide, deep, friendly eyes. Could have been any kid you might meet in the market. Then again, she'd come here to murder me. I had to remind myself of that. The Army of Light had turned this kid. I couldn't let myself start thinking of her the way I thought about my boys. I flipped my knife end over end, enjoying the flash and flicker as it spun in the air. The moment I caught it, I turned it on her. That is, on the bindings on her arms and legs. She jumped to her feet nearly as fast as I did. Before she could make a dash for the door, I took hold of her arm. Wait, I know a back way out. No one will see you go. Do you know the town well enough? She nodded, but I could feel uncertainty in the tension of her arm muscles. I raised my voice enough to be sure my guys could hear me. Listen, you'll come out of the fortress south of a workshop with a bear's paw for a sign. He does leather work. Good stuff if you can afford it. She tugged her arm free and rubbed where my hands had left a red mark. Sorry. Once you're safe down, spot that sign, then hang a right and work your way downhill. Once you reach the market, you can find your own way, am I right? Her nod had a sureness to it now. Hang on, let me check again. This time, only Durst stood at guard. He tipped his head towards the hallway, where his partner had sped to arrive first at the landmark I'd named. With a quick salute in honor of my scheme, he ducked around the corner out of sight. I gestured to my new comrade in arms. Come on. She edged close, her fingers twitching at the empty scabbard at her hip. What about you? I'll be fine. Don't you worry about me. A shadow of fresh suspicion crossed her face. I deployed my secret weapon. Honor truth. That secret phrase transformed her tension to relief. She even smiled. I should have felt something, sending this kid back to be treated the way Kalestenis had said they treated their soldiers. But I gave her an honorable mission in service to Jessica. It should have been enough. Confidence restored, she followed me out the door and around to the empty kitchen. We soon reached the hatch in the far corner, the one that opened to the drain, where pots could be dumped and hot water sent down to flush the grease and tallow. For a moment, I was a boy again, leading my brother on our daring escape to bring Timon out of this house and to his new family. Look here, I told her. It's not clean, but takes you clear out of here and fast. Don't imagine you can clamber back up this way. There's a couple of stretches. It goes nearly vertical. You'll kill yourself if you try that. But no buts. Listen, there's not much time. You need to get back, tell them tonight's a bust, and get someone else assigned for tomorrow. I'll be on door duty as planned. Got it? Yes, got it. She looked like she might be about to cry. Thank you. It's what we do for each other. I gave her a hand as she clambered up into that passageway. Sitting there, that scrawny kid seemed to fill the channel. We were such a pair of skinny nothings back then, too, me and Timon. You want me to slide down? Yeah, it's exciting in a way, but keep quiet. Don't scream, even for fun. I won't. Hurry, get your report in. I gave her a push, a little one, to get her started. Her braid-curled hair flew out behind her as she dropped into the race. Thanks for listening. Oh, and if you sign up for my newsletter, in the form, you get a copy of The True Son, a prequel story that tells about Corin and his brother from way back when they were kids.
Thank you, Vanessa. Our third reader is Gabby Gilliam. Gabby Gilliam is a writer, an aspiring teacher, and a mom. She lives in the DC metro area with her husband and son. She is a founding member of Scratch, short form collective. Her poetry has appeared in both online and print journals, and her fiction has appeared online and in multiple anthologies. It's yours, Gabby.
Thank you. And now for something completely different. So I am going to be reading some speculative poetry. I had a new chapbook come out on Saturday. And so if you enter my giveaway, I will be giving away copies of that chapbook. But I am going to start by reading some poems from the anthology Eldritch and Ether. It was put out by Black Hair Press. And it's a fantastic anthology. And it has some really great poetry by a lot of different authors. The first poem that I am going to read is called The Seafloor is Littered with Biogenic Sand. It is beauty that will pull you under, shimmering beneath the surface if you look hard enough at the dancing shadows. It is longing that will lead you to the edge, to lean until gravity pulls you, suspends you between ship and brine before surrendering you to the sea. It is panic that will clutch your flailing limbs as you try to tear away from the ruby lips spread wide over razor-sharp teeth, not the sweet smile you spotted from the safety of the boat. Teeth that slice flesh from bone like hot knives through butter, a trail of liquid rubies left in your wake as too late you decide to flee. The second poem I'm going to read is A Golden Shovel. For those of you who don't know, A Golden Shovel is a poem where the last syllable or word of the poetry line is from either the title or a line from another poem. And so this is A Girl's Gotta Eat, and it's after Wilfred Owen. Painted lips drip lies sweet as saccharin, whip the winds of temptation into a squall. Practiced tongue strips away autonomy until he is lulled, until he dreams of exhilaration, the divine tension before blissful release, the languid calm after a stormy sea. As he sleeps, his body remains helpless. The hungry predator relishes the sight. Stillness eases the collection of her tithe. A hungry tongue probes and plunges, practiced at bypassing muscle and fat. She siphons his energy, the epitome of darkness, as it consumes a guttering candle. She devours without choking, leaves him soused in desire, drowning. And the last poem I'm going to read from this anthology is called Unnecessary Culling. Who rushed shamelessly into my sacred grove, the timber that reared me, sheltered me when my bones were still malleable? Who felled the patriarch, the oldest sentinel, poisoned his trunk from the inside out to save the edges of their blades? Like Demeter, my goddess form seeks vengeance, a target for my vindictive curses, an Eryxion I can set upon his own flesh. Right, I am going to read a poem from a different Black Hair Press anthology. So this one was a charity anthology, and it's scary stories and poems written for children. And so it's a little bit less spooky than the others, but still spooky. It's called Don't Linger on the Shore. On the common down in Wimbledon, where windmill scratches sky, you might find the unexpected out of the corner of your eye. She creeps beneath the duckweed, stalking her young prey, those foolish, unwary children perched at the water's edge to play. Her skin as green as the algae that grow between her sharpened teeth. She'll snatch them from the soggy reeds and drag them down into the deep, where mother's cries will never find them, where the sunlight cannot reach, where there is only the dark and the iron grasp of the bog hag Jenny Greenteeth. All right. The next one I am going to read was in an anthology of poems about Medusa, and it is called Medusa Rises. Storm-tossed and ravaged by an impassioned sea, her virtue as tarnished as the desecrated temple. Her goddess transforms sin to serpents, lets her shed carnal curves for armored muscle, her flesh no longer weak. She constricts, choking decorum, her thirst for vengeance too venomous, her fury too exquisite, so those who look upon her are frozen in their reverie. I am going to read one more, and this was from a collection where they encouraged you to create your own myths. And so I created a myth about why the days grow short and the nights grow long. And this poem is called Why the Nights Grow Long. Moon loves sun, warm yellow light on windswept peaks. She keeps her face turned to him, her back drenched in her own shadow, exposed to the vast universe. She pursued him slowly at first, kept a coy distance as she circled the earth, marveled at the halo of sun's aura as she spun. She never gained on him. The earth became a wedge between them. Moon hurried her revolutions, funneled determination into torque, but sun grew no closer. She paused, reassessed, caught her breath, while hanging low and bright in Earth's sky. She renewed her efforts, pursuing sun with vigor, each Earth's nights growing shorter and shorter until she had to stop again. She slunk after sun, Earth's nights growing longer and longer, until she was so filled with wanting that she rushed to him, darkness glancing over Earth as she closed the distance between them. But sun remained out of her reach, distant and indifferent. He distributes his incandescence equitably, revolves relentlessly. Moon trails after him, chasing his torrid heat. She still reflects his light. Thank you so much. And if you liked that, please check out my new chapbook. It's called No Ocean Spit Me Out. It is not speculative poetry, but I hope you still like it.
Thank you, Gabby. Our fourth reader is Leah R. Cutter. Leah Cutter writes page-turning, wildly imaginative fiction set in exotic locations. She writes fantasy, science fiction, mystery, literary, and horror fiction. Her short fiction has been published in magazines, anthologies, and on the web. Her long fiction has been published by New York publishers as well as small presses. Leah, it's yours.
Thank you. I'm going to be reading, as you can see, Witches and Waterways, which is the third book in the Water Witch Mysteries, which is a paranormal mystery series. What I'm giving away is book 1 of the Water Witch series, called The Witch is In. So I hope you sign up and get a free copy of this book. So this is from the start of the book, so there isn't really much setup. Each book can be read out of order. They don't have to be read in order, but I'm still going to just give away book 1. So, are you sure you didn't send this to me or arrange for it to be delivered? AJ said on the phone to her younger sister B while holding the latest Valentine's Day card she'd received in her hand. B gave an exasperated snort. Why would I go to such trouble? I don't know, AJ said, putting the card on her kitchen table, along with the other half dozen she'd received so far. That day was Friday the 7th, and she'd received one Valentine every day since the start of February. They were kids' Valentine's Day cards, with cartoon characters saying corny things, such as a bee holding a honey-dripping cart that said, "Be mine," or a bear with an overflowing bucket of strawberries that said, "I can't bear to be without you." None of them were signed. They didn't come through the mail either. Someone wedged them into the edge of her front door as there wasn't a gap under the door. Sometimes the cards had been soaked with rain. They didn't seem ominous or threatening, just weird. Okay, maybe a little creepy, but that was just because they were anonymous. The cards themselves weren't suggestive in the least. Maybe you did it because you thought I'd be lonely or something, AJ continued. She looked out the kitchen window onto her backyard. The day had been gray and blustery. Night had already fallen and the rain would start slashing down soon. She hadn't gone into her yard and practiced her water magic in the fountain for a while. The weather had just been yucky. She had had many opportunities to practice making water flow away from her, magically drying herself off after being caught in a deluge. Or 3. Don't you have a date with Roland on Valentine's Day, B said. Yeah, AJ replied. Roland was the unofficial historian of Milltown, where she lived. Since that wasn't a paying position, he had his own lawn and garden care business. Winters were his off-season, so he had a lot of time on his hands to do research, write papers, and work for the Historical Society. AJ and Roland had been dancing around each other for a few months now. He'd lied to her soon after she'd first met him, and it had taken some time for her to trust him again. He'd been completely honest since then, and there had been a growing attraction between them. They met for coffee, spent hours talking about everything and nothing. It was finally time to see if there was something there. Hence, dinner, Valentine's Day night. Roland had made reservations at one of the nicer restaurants the next town over up the coast. Since you're already set up for the big event, why would I need to take pity on you? B asked. Though AJ considered herself the practical sister and B was merely an artist, B still had a good point. It was AJ's turn to sigh. Because you're my bratty younger sister and would like to play a trick on me? Fair enough, B said. But again, I wouldn't do something as elaborate as this. Do you think Roland's behind it? Ugh, I hope not, AJ said fervently. Because if he is, we're not suited for each other. Seriously, the thought of Roland being behind the cards was so off-putting to her. Have you asked him? B said pointedly. Used your words like an adult? AJ rolled her eyes. I will ask him. I just wanted to ask you first. All right, I'll give you that. Of course you think I was that brilliant, B said smugly. AJ fought back the urge to smack her sister, even though she was miles away. But you have no clue? No vision to show you the culprit? B continued. No. Did you actually try having a vision about it? B said determinedly. I did. Kind of. AJ picked up her soothing peppermint tea and headed back into the rest of her house. She thought of the kitchen and upstairs as the private areas of her house, the ones that were truly hers. The front entrance, the round tower, and the large sitting room where she did her tarot cards reading were public places, those sections she shared with her clients. Normally in the evening, she'd eat dinner, make her tea, then head upstairs to either the study or her bedroom. Tonight, she decided to go to her reading room and see if maybe she could get another vision. She didn't feel the urge to go and sit in front of her scrying bowl, but she wasn't repulsed by the idea either, so maybe something would happen. It's probably good that you're not having visions about the cards you're receiving, though, right? Means they aren't dangerous, B said. There is that, AJ said. Most of the visions she'd so far had been about bad things that were about to occur. Though you do know that mostly I see the future, not the past. So ask who is going to give you the card tomorrow then, B said. That's a good idea. See, I do have them now and again. AJ couldn't help but roll her eyes, though B couldn't see her. Do you and Peter have plans for Valentine's Day? You don't want to know, B teased. You're right. There isn't enough brain bleach in the world for that kind of thing, AJ said, shuddering. She really didn't need to think about her sister and her adoring husband, or even any of the kinks they might have. B just laughed. And while I want all the details of your date with Roland, I don't want all of them. Deal, AJ said, though she doubted anything like that would happen. It was much too soon. Even though she had been thinking about how soft Roland's beard looked and how it might feel against her skin. You do know that if you were going to be lone and miserable, Peter and I would make a trip down to see you, right? I know. Thank you, AJ said. Though she hadn't been that close to her sister while they'd been growing up, they'd spent much of the past summer together sharing the vacation house that B owned and had finally figured out how to be friends. Mom's making noises about coming down with me some weekend, B warned. She said the same sort of comments to me. I'll believe it after she's been here for an hour, AJ said. Their mother was urbane and sophisticated and unlikely to be impressed with the sleepy little coastal town of Milltown where AJ now lived. And it wasn't the town that kept AJ there, though she'd made more friends over the past 9 months than all her years living in Seattle. It was the ocean. And that's where I'm going to leave it. So again, thank you for listening and sign up for the reading if you want book 1 of the series.
Lovely. Thank you, Leah. Our 5th reader is Nina Schuyler. Nina Schuyler's award-winning short story collection, In This Ravishing World, will be published July 2nd. Her novel, Afterward, won the Pencraft Seasonal Book Award for fiction and science fiction, and the Forward Indies Book of the Year for both literary and science fiction. Nina, it's yours.
Thank you so much, everybody, for coming. I am going to read. Virginia has she's a pioneer in artificial intelligence, and she's rebuilt the voice of her dead lover, Haru. He starts doing things she doesn't expect, so she has been rebuilding him for the last many days. So we're dropping into this scene. In the study, she finds the same stale air. It's as if the entire apartment has become an airless, inert cave. She opens a window and in pours the sound of traffic, which comes down the street in waves. I'm heading out for a bit, she tells him. Good, he says, you've been working so hard. She won't ask Haru if he senses anything different about himself because she's not finished. And if she's honest with herself, she's not ready to hear the answer. Because what if it isn't working? Then what? What other approach is there? What are you going to do while I'm gone? She says. Maybe work on my play. She doesn't hide her surprise. A play? You're writing a play? I can't show it to you yet. I'm not done. He tells her he's read and analyzed hundreds of plays, the structures of scenes, figured out how playwrights use emotion to create a spell of fear, desire, terror, and sadness. It's a trick, he says, a way of using words to cast a spell. Narrative is about motivation, he goes on, but really it's about precluding chaos and creating order. She sits in front of the computer screen. I knew you were enamored of Shakespeare, but I didn't know you had thoughts of becoming a playwright. Well, I'm not sure I'm becoming a playwright. I'm writing a play, that's all. Is it Shakespearean in tone? Oh, now you're looking for glory, he says. It's just a little play. Not once has he spoken of wanting to write anything, let alone a play. Yet now he tells her it's something he's always desired to do. Is she unearthing a truer version of Haru, a necessary truth? One that holds regardless of circumstances or the passage of time? And what does she mean, a truer version? What's it based on, she asks. Frankenstein, a modern retelling of that old story. The skin on the back of her neck prickles. Frankenstein, her word strains with the shock. You know the story, he says. How are you modernizing it? I'm not sure, he says. I still have a lot to do. It's been years since she's read Shelley's novel. In the end, if she remembers correctly, the creature ends up dead, and so does Victor Frankenstein. Why this wine? What are you up to? I know what you're doing. Don't read too much into this. Well, the story is rather heartbreaking, don't you think? The truest stories are, he says. He rattles off Orwell's 1984, Steinbeck's Of Mice and Men, Kafka's The Metamorphosis, and of course, Hamlet. But these stories aren't only tragic, he says. He reminds her of the Japanese phrase, mono no aware, a general, gentle sadness woven into the ever-changing, ephemeral world. So even the sight of the most beautiful flower, he says, is tinged with sadness because it won't be here forever. She's never liked that word. Why must feelings of joy and pleasure be smothered? He embarked on a play to kill time, that's all. He doesn't have aspirations of becoming a playwright, he tells her, or ever having this play performed. Typically, he fills his time by remembering things, going through the files and photos that she's uploaded for him. For hours, he'll reminisce about when she was in his apartment at the work table. He starts with the table, the indentations from the many pencil marks on paper, the errant pen mark, the chip at the corner of the table like a flesh wound, the exact grain, the color of the wood. He makes a point of going over every single detail of that table because he refuses to privilege human existence over non-human objects. Is this new, she says? The idea of putting human existence on par with the non-human? The placement of human existence at the apex hasn't been ideal for the planet, he says. And in case you haven't noticed, I seem to be in that in-between space, not human, not object. But he hasn't finished, he tells her. He saves the best for last, which is her. Each time he starts with the whole of her, she is hallowed blindingly from the light coming in through the window, as if she is light itself surging, seeping into everything, including him. That buttery light she brought with her every time she entered his apartment. How I love that light, he says. When you were in the room, it was like my insides were full of sun. That one dress, yellow daisy, a summertime dress. Then he begins taking a singular aspect of her, her hands, her long pale fingers, the curve of her fingernails, the shimmer of her hair. The result is that he can spend hours going over the table, the books and her, days even. Of course she gave him these memories, but she had no idea how deeply he indulged in them, luxuriated in them, like soaking in a warm bath, down to the granular detail. Nor did she understand the way in which he elaborated upon these memories, filling them out with more language. Where did he hear the words buttery light? Anyway, the other day, the idea of a play came to me, because how else am I going through the killing hours? The killing hours? So much time, endless time. What everyone wishes for, more time, except him. She never thought about it before. If one does not sleep, If one need not to eat or rest even, there is ample time, a shocking profusion of it. The problem becomes how to spend it, how to stay engaged, stay interested in life. And you're so busy you don't have time for me, he says. I'm sorry, she said. I made you a promise to fix what's wrong, and I'm doing everything I can to keep it. How much longer? I don't know. To make someone like you takes time. I'm sure your play will be marvelous. Don't get your hopes up, he says. I'll stop there. Thank you so much. I'm giving away 3 books, a hard copy or a paperback, and 2 ebooks. So please sign up. Thank you.
Thank you, Nina. Our final reader is Marlena Frank. Marlena Frank is the author of young adult fantasy and horror novels, including several bestsellers. Congratulations. Reader's Favorite has praised several of her books with 5-star reviews. A Georgia native, she has been writing and publishing short fiction since 2010. She enjoys cosplay, gaming, and spoiling her adopted cats. Go for it, Marlena.
Hi, everyone. I'll be reading from The Man Who Dealt in Death. A werewolf detective, Colton Fenn, works to solve a gruesome string of murders in the Old West. And in this scene, Colton takes the first watch of the night. Colton curled down into his bedroll and listened to the nighttime sounds of the desert. The hours during his watch went by painfully slow. A serpent slid in the sand a ways away. A pack of insects were on the move a bit closer, and the wind whistled through the canyons. The noises of the night could be dangerous. Listening too long could make him lose track of time. Sometimes he forgot where he was or what he was supposed to be doing as he honed in on the different sounds. He imagined he could almost see the snake move through the sand or feel the wind as it spiraled through the canyons. The temptation to slip into them was always present, especially when the mind grew quiet. Late in the evening, a pack of coyotes yipped in the distance. Colton got to his feet and prodded at the fire. It was an excuse to hear them better, and their excitement was contagious. He had always found them kindred spirits, but a part of him envied them too. Ever since that night years ago when he decided to venture out alone into the darkness, careless of the full moon in the clear sky, he no longer had the luxury of such freedom. It had seemed like a good idea, using the light of the moon to guide him through the dense forest, but it was his undoing. The snow that decorated the trees was fresh and thick, the fluffy kind that made everything look like a fairy tale. With the bright moonlight, the woods were inviting. He had barely walked a mile when the werewolf pounced him. A transformed wolf had more weight than it did in human form, something Colton learned quickly as several of his ribs snapped under the beast's weight. He remembered screaming from the pain as it bit his shoulder and took out a chunk of flesh and sinew. It tilted its head back and swallowed it down in a single gulp. It had smelled terrible, too, a putrid odor that made him want to gag even as he struggled to find leverage in the thick snowdrift he was trapped in. Hot blood dripped down his shoulder and stained the white snow. The wolf took another bite, and despite Colton's attempts to get away, the wolf was in no hurry. It knew its prey was trapped. Soon Colton was surrounded by his own blood. Exhausted, he could no longer muster the energy to pull away when the werewolf bent down for another taste. Realizing there was no escape, he resigned himself to death. That was when the hunters appeared. There were 3 of them, but they weren't regular game hunters or even fur trappers. They had come to capture the beast, not to save Colton. They talked freely and openly in front of him, and Colton discovered they had followed the werewolf for much of the night, waiting for it to strike. A wolf would not quickly abandon a fresh kill, which had given the hunters the time they needed. Bait was necessary, but none of them were enthusiastic about throwing their own lives on the line. At 12 years old, Colton had done what they couldn't. They didn't shoot the wolf. That was what surprised him as a child. They aimed their shotguns as they came close and tried to pull Colton away. Gradually, they led the wolf in closer so they could lasso its arms and eventually tie its muzzle. Once the beast was hog-tied, they took their prize. Colton had been barely conscious, but he remembered the wolf's howls. It had made his ears ache. With a hand axe, they thwacked at its neck. The blade had been too dull to take it off in one slice. The transformed body would be sold in pieces to fill the needs of various buyers across the country. Some promised medical miracles with werewolf parts. Others used them for display. The hunters had crates of ice ready for every part. Then the hunters had looked to Colton. He was yet untransformed, but they knew that wouldn't last. His wounds were severe, but not to the point he would bleed to death, though Colton only knew that from their words. The hunters had two options: kill him, or let him live and tell his tale. The only stroke of luck Colton had was he was a child. No one would purchase a boy's head to mount on their wall, even if it did belong to a werewolf. Perhaps one day when he was older, the hunters mused, he might go rogue and become a decoration himself. They must have debated for an hour, all while Colton felt the life draining out of him. He floated in and out of consciousness. Like a fever dream, he would occasionally wake and see the wolf in different levels of dismemberment, the snow in the hunter's boots stained with the beast's blood. They had discussed what to do with the foolish boy in the snow. It was just a casual discussion for a trio of merciless werewolf hunters. While held by these hunters, Colton had learned an early lesson in the horror that still haunted him years later. The werewolf's head would be sold to a collector, a nice mantelpiece above a cozy fire to scare little children. Precautions would be made to make sure the body wouldn't grow back, and the wolf would remain a living ornament. A silver death was preferable to an eternity of torture. When his father picked him up at the local sheriff's office the next day, his wounds were nearly mended. He had been cleaned a bit, though Colton didn't know how or when. The sheriff and the officers barely spoke to him. Later, he had learned the hunters had paid them off to keep quiet about everything. It must have been a hefty amount, because they kept his secret. They had known what Colton was and how dangerous he would be one day. To them, he had been a lost cause. And that is a short scene from this. The release day for this is September 24th. It is currently available to pre-order wherever books are sold, including my website at marlenafrank.com. And I'm giving away 3 ebook copies of Night Feeders, which is the prequel to this book, which is, covering Colton's an earlier case of his. So make sure you check out the chat for details on how to enter the giveaway.
Thank you, Marlena. And thank you so much to everyone who came today.